Hi, good morning, everybody. Yataya Bene. We are so excited to be here this morning to celebrate Morning Stars Leaders, their second launch, part two of the Stories Behind the Crown. And I'm really happy to come to you as the Morning Star Leaders organizer, and I wear so many hats in the community. I serve as a board member, I've served as an executive director, and today we're really excited because we're helping our youth to lead the organization, and this event is one of them. I'm taking this time to acknowledge all of the people who are tuning in from around the area, from around Arizona. And we are excited to welcome a group of young ladies who have been working very hard, probably from a very young age, and are going to share stories about their journey pursuing the crown and the title and the service that they give here in the community. But before we really get started, I want to take a moment to open in prayer. There's so much in our lives right now that are being affected by so many different things, and we just want to take a moment to start off in that way and to ensure that we have these really positive feelings to as we go forward. So if we can just take a moment to either bow our heads or take a moment of silence as I share a few words. Shamana san yadalkel Johana ehna hayol kal nehodot nehotsui chahalye sisnajine tsodzil dok osli depensa zilna odili zilchoe Altonash Atobiyaj. Now we just ask you to be with us. We ask you to bless the minds and the hearts of these young ladies that we are supporting today, that each one of them be excited and eager for the services that they give as they carry their crown. We ask you to be with our young people, our organizers who are working together to make these experiences possible for their community, both here locally and around the state. We ask you to be with all of our young people, our children who are going to school, who are managing those schedules and tapping in into this part of them that will persevere through whatever challenges they experience. Now we ask you to be with our families, to encourage them and to help them guide our young people forward. We ask you to be with all of our tribal communities around the state and support them and guide them through this decision-making process as they stand in support of their members, their tribal members, their families, their clanship, and their villages. And now we ask you to be with all of our tribal leaders as they make these critical decisions that will impact our lives for years to come. And now we ask you to be with all of the people as they face hardships, losses through family systems, and we ask you to be with them in this new year as we approach the results of the voting that takes place that impacts every single person's life when it comes to health, education, and our environment. And we ask you to be with everyone at this time. But most importantly, we ask you to be with us during this moment, to guide us through this process so that we enjoy and we learn from one another. And just take those words in and allow it to guide us through this rest of this day and this activity. As we move forward, we're also very excited to welcome again Kiara Spotsville. Kiara came to us with her family and her brother Kai, who was really little at that time, but now he's definitely much taller than I am. But Kiara and her brother came to us at Morning Star Leaders, and they took part in our activities, and it's been really beautiful to watch her grow. It's been beautiful to see her take a little bit of skill set and all that encouragement from our parents and support to really help her elevate everything that she decides to pursue. Today, Kiara is an aspiring professional. She's studying public relations and involved in the journalism and mass communication at Arizona State University. Spotsville is a seasoned leader who's focused on relationship building between groups, and she's working toward a minor in organizational leadership. She's served in a leadership role in various student organizations, including the president and vice president of ASU's chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists and the Native American Journalists, respectively. And when I was grateful the other evening to take part in their first launch of their NAJA event, and it was online and it was very well attended. I was really pleased to see how a group of young people came together. They decided that there was something really important to them, and they planned, they worked very hard, they launched it, and it was really exciting. I felt really honored to be a part of that, and glad to continue to support our Morningstar leaders in every which way. So I'm going to hand the baton over to Kiara and let her get started. Thank you so much, Kiara, for joining us once again. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me again, Morningstar Leaders. So I just wanted to go ahead and introduce who Morningstar Leaders are really quick. The Morningstar Youth Leaders is a local community initiative aimed at getting Native youth college ready by providing community service experience through organized events, donation drives, and regular youth group meetings. So like Debbie said, I was a part of Morningstar Leaders, and I still am to this day. It's a really great opportunity for youth to get involved with their culture and to really just give back to the community. So going forward, I want to take a brief moment to do a land acknowledgement. So soon you'll see a number float across your screen. If you just text your zip code wherever you're at to this number, you'll go ahead and know which native land you're on. It's really great to just make sure that we're respecting the people who took care of the land before we were all here in this more colonized world. So now continuing forward, I'd really like to introduce our first speaker, Miss Salt River, 2020 to 2021. I'm going to go ahead and add Miss Isabella to the screen.
I had to unmute myself.
Good morning, Isabella. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yes. Slixiatic, Anianap Chigig, Isabella Doherty, Aniap Onkake Moramjud, Ani Goko Vastamamki Kaedag. Good morning, everyone. My name is Isabella Doherty. I am the 24-year-old daughter of David Doherty and Melissa Villalobos. I am a senior at Arizona State University, majoring in English with the emphasis in linguistics. And I am Miss Salt River 2020-2021.
All right, awesome. I'm so glad you could be here today. And to kind of just start out, I wanted to ask you about your crown. This is the Behind the Crown series. Mm-hmm. So I wanted you to kind of tell me the story behind your crown, or talk about the materials, anything that you think is significant about your crown.
Yes. So the woven crown that I'm wearing today is made by Ricky Francisco from Gila River. Big shout out. It's made from willow and devil's claw. And actually, I believe this crown was made in 2015. So that's when we started using it. And I love these crowns because they're all passed down. So basically, all of my sisters have worn this. Miss Mandarie Jose before me, she was Miss Salt River 2019, 2020. And I just think it's really special that it's been passed down through all of us.
And with the crown being passed down between you and all your sisters prior, how do you feel like the crown connects to your culture, similarly as culture is passed down?
So in an interesting way, I would say that the spirit kind of each young lady that wore this is connected into I feel like it's woven into the crown. I feel connected with them at all times. And I think that's really special. It's kind of how culture works.
That's really beautiful that, it's woven into the crown as it's a woven crown. I really like that. So what are your aspirations as Miss Salt River, and just as a young lady in general? What are your aspirations?
My aspirations as Miss Salt River is to encourage young people from my community to pursue their talents, specifically art, So my platform is encouraging positive self-expression through the arts. And I felt like that was really relevant during this time, considering, we have to isolate ourselves in a sense when we're social distancing and we're not really leaving our houses because we don't want to contract COVID and or pass it around. So during these difficult times, I feel like encouraging young people to sing, play music, draw, paint, knit. I actually just started picking up knitting. Just doing whatever they can to put them in a better mindset, I think is so important right now.
Yeah, the arts are so important in general. Just, especially for Native American tribes, the arts are so important. And like you said, during these times where we're stuck in the house, I know a lot of people were, at the beginning of COVID, it was so many different trends going on. There was like the foamy coffee and just like a bunch of other things that people just started trying. So in a way, COVID has obviously been a tragedy, and it's a pandemic, so it's really hard hitting, but it also forced a lot of people to kind of expand what they were missing in their lives. A lot of people picked up new hobbies or returned to old hobbies, things like that. So that's really great that your platform is to encourage art. I am not very creative. I love that you were talking about knitting because I don't have the patience to learn, and it's something that like I really want to do. I think my problem is the patience aspect. But yeah, do you do anything else besides the knitting that you said?
I'm a singer. I write music. I play the piano, guitar, clarinet, and I recently got into painting. I haven't done it in a while, but I really enjoy that too.
That's awesome. That's so many instruments. Kind of back to the arts. I don't have the patience for it. It's so funny. So
I believe everyone has artistic ability. I really do. And I just think it needs to be nurtured, because you're not perfect at something automatically. You have to work at it. And I think during this time, it's a great opportunity to do so.
Yeah. And how can the viewers who are watching right now, how can they support you on your platform?
So you can reach out to us at the Miss Salt River Committee, who I am given this title under. Please record yourself talking about your talent, your art, your music. Record yourself. Please send it to us because we really want to see that. And you know what? We want to give young people a platform to share their arts.
And why do you think it's important for young people to share their art? Why is that something that young people should be looking towards doing?
Because it's self-expression. Young people today, I feel, struggle with finding who they are. But I feel like through the arts, people can express themselves in basically artistic ways.
Awesome. And my last question for you, what inspired you to vote? We know there's a big election around the corner very soon. I believe yesterday or maybe 2 days ago was the last day to request your mail-in ballot. So for viewers who are watching, make sure that you go out and vote at this point. If you don't already have your ballot, make sure to drop it off. But Miss Salt River, what inspired you to vote?
So the first thing I did when I turned 18 was get registered to vote. I think it's so important, especially coming from an Indigenous background. Considering our ancestors weren't able to vote, they didn't have that representation, but now we do. And it is so important to make sure our voices are heard.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next speaker. But before we go ahead and do that, I wanted to remind everyone who's watching, make sure to leave comments, encourage your royalty, leave any comments for Morningstar, ask any questions you want. Go ahead and use that comment. And next, we will go ahead and move on to Miss Indigenous ASU 2020-2021. This is Miss Lulu, and I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Skugstjarik, everyone. Ani napshali Lourdes Pereira, ani wajitiratam Chiwame, Anian Sirmuk Amjad as Skigitam Habaki. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Lourdes Pereira. I'm Hiachiratam Menyueme. I am this year's Miss Indigenous ASU 2021 or 2020-2021. I come from the district of San Lucie. I'm also a member of the Thanata Nation. So I'm double majoring right now in Justice Studies, American Indian Studies. I'm a sophomore. I also sit on the American Indian Advisory Council for the Arizona Education Department, and I also work for Labriola, the American Indian Data Center at ASU.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So how are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm really good as well. Will you go ahead and explain a little bit about your crown to us?
Yeah, so, well, it's very tall, as you can see. It's interesting because I'm 5'11", and so this crown, I think, gives me like at least like 4 more inches, it's amazing. But, so my favorite part about this crown actually is the base. So this is a pattern that what's really interesting of this crown is that the Mr. and Miss both came together and actually, we're talking about the designs for the future Miss. So this was a design they both really wanted to emphasize on because it showed like unification of a community. It's just so everyone can see. Everyone. It's just the band coming, around my head, but it represents unification. The top portion of the crown, I have to get solo, is it's a basket design, but for the former Miss, it's not the full design, but it was a portion of it, and it was supposed to symbolize leadership and education, and there was a background story of this specific design. And in the middle part, it's the Arizona sunset. We all know how that is. Like this woman did an amazing job on the crown. And the black part, if you can see, it's a thoak, it's a mountain that represents what people know here as the A Mountain. Of course, I can't say the name in O'odham, I can't translate it, but a lot of people, at least the O'odham, know it as like the Greasy Mountain, and I'm sure Miss Salt River could speak more about it as well, but it was supposed to represent what we know, or what majority of people know as A Mountain at ASU. And the blue portion underneath the thoak is supposed to represent Shuthak, water. And altogether, of course, I do believe it's a strong message for myself, or for at the time the future Miss, of just like the unification of our community, the environment, and also what we're doing right now with higher education as Indigenous people, and what the Miss Indigenous, the future Miss Indigenous, is supposed to represent.
And I loved the little part. Well, I loved all of it, but I loved the part about the leadership and education. And I mean, you serve on, like you said, in a student organization. I serve in student organization, and I feel like a lot of times Native American students, when they do serve on these leadership boards, they're the only one who, is Native American or is Indigenous. And so I wanted to ask you, have you ever had any struggles in these leadership and education roles, or how's it come to you?
Yeah, it's so funny you bring it up, because actually, I didn't really start getting into like student organizations until I was like maybe a junior in high school. I was the female co-president for Tucson Native Youth Council. It's the first Native Youth Council in Tucson, and it was like an amazing experience. But that was my first leadership position, actually. And of course, there's always like struggles and battles in certain spaces, mostly as a woman. and a woman of color. It's always, you kind of get those faces of surprise when you do something, like actually get your job done or like go beyond that. And I mean, it was unfortunate, excuse me, but even though like throughout my journey with education, even attending Arizona State University, I'm a sophomore this year, so just even last year, I got involved with like Alliance of Indigenous People, Indigenious, Tribal Nations Tour, like ASU offers so many different student orgs. And it was just awesome. And I think really like with the experience of the youth council in high school, it really helped me find that community within higher education at Arizona State University. I feel like some people don't really know the emphasis of what student orgs can do, or even youth councils at a time of education where you can find that community. And it does help with leadership and leadership roles. There's always been battles and struggles. Within that time, I was the former female co-president of Tucson Native Youth Council. I actually, myself and a really good friend of mine, Maddie Jean, she's actually the Miss Pima Community College now. We both implemented a policy within the Tucson Unified School District to allow Native Americans to wear their regalia on graduation. And at the time, it was a very long battle. It was my senior year. We started in October and it went all the way to March. So that was probably the biggest struggle I really did face within my leadership. And it taught me a lot. And I think that's what also within our leadership positions, within student orgs, those struggles really do help define our leadership. It really does strengthen that. And I think that's what, people, and I hope the audience, takes away, is that when you're looking for a community and you even are, in your journey of your leadership, it's always great to get involved with different student organizations and just different organizations that fit within your journey and what you're trying to do within your life.
That was really shocking to me that you had to fight in order to have students allowed to wear their regalia. At my high school graduation, I just wore it. I didn't even ask anyone. It's really interesting to me that, I took that for granted, and then you had to, fight for it. And I'm sure that's similar around the country. That's something that I never even, thought about. So that was really interesting that, you have to fight. But I think in general, like you were saying earlier, women of color really do know that it's a fight to be able to be on that same playing ground in order to make sure your voice is equally as heard. And sometimes you give it your all and it doesn't always work out. So it definitely is a learning experience for youth to be a part of these organizations, like you were saying, really build up their confidence, really build up, their support systems around them, and just kind of be the best versions of themselves that they can be.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's always and just to add to, I feel even as, women of color and women in these types of spaces of leadership, it's always we have to be so perfect and we have to be on top of everything. But I do want, to let everyone know and just to say, it's okay not to know certain things. It's okay also not to have everything perfect. And it's okay to ask for help. That is something within my journey as a leader I struggled with. I always thought it had to be perfect. I never thought I could ask for help because I was, trying to just be so perfect. And I knew that, while being a woman of color, people would already expect me to fail. But just because you don't know something, just because you ask for help does not mean you fail, or that, you just took 10 steps back on anything. It's actually, you're being a better leader in those different ways. So it's just to add on top of what you're stating right now. Thank you.
I love this conversation. Yes, asking for help does make you a better leader. Knowing when you need help, knowing when someone else might be able to mentor you, that always makes you a better leader and ultimately just gives you more experience. And I love seeing women of color in leadership positions because that means something's going right. But I also just wanted to ask you about your platform. What are your aspirations as Miss Indigenous ASU?
Yes, so my platform is Amplifying Indigenous Voices and Identity Through Education, which, of course, while being Miss Indigenous ASU, or I'm representing a university, the Indigenous community, I do believe it's very vital and crucial that we use our of course we see, right, education, and I'm even, you know, sitting on a board that represents education, but I really wanted to bring in, you know, our ancestral knowledge. I want us to decolonize these whitewashed educational systems that we grow up in. And I think that's really important, mostly when we're talking about a university. On a university level, it's unfortunate to still see those, you know, things being implemented, but this needs to start, you know, within the whole education system. And at least for right now, my goal is to still bring, you know, the Indigenous community. I don't even have to bring the Indigenous community together because ASU already, you know, there's just so many different student orgs, and I believe that it's just, it's absolutely incredible how strong the ASU community is. But I do think it's a time to decolonize, and it's a time to show really what, you know, Indigenous identity and Indigenous voices can do within this education system. I thought it would be really great to emphasize on the identity part, because I think within the education systems, because it's, you know, so whitewashed, we struggle a lot with our identity. And even coming to a university level, when you don't know or not connected so much to your identity, it you know, you do struggle within major spaces like this. And I'm speaking from experience here as a Hiachiratan youth, and, you know, a lot of injustices my people have been through. It's just important, I think, to be that community and be there for our Indigenous community, but decolonize these different spaces that we do stand in as Indigenous youth, as Indigenous peoples within higher education.
Yeah, that's really, it's great that you're doing that, and that's your platform. For example, NAJA, the Native American Journalists Association, that didn't exist my freshman year. It just, they had every other, like, I guess, minority race group except for Native American. And a lot of times Indigenous communities do get forgotten and kind of just placed on the back burner. And I love what you said about kind of returning to Indigenous ways. At our NAJA event that we had earlier this past week, one thing that I kind of brought up with kind of more government instead of school, but it's along the same lines. In California during the wildfires, they went back to Indigenous leaders who were originally the protectors of the land, and were asking them, how can we, you know, fix this? How can we make it better? And they went and returned to practices that they were already had, but were through colonization were gotten rid of. And now there's like these huge wildfires. The damage was already done, but now there's a learning opportunity there to really say, okay, let's go back to what we know and what we know works. And like you said, yeah, universities, even at, you know, public education, private education, all of it is very whitewashed, and it does take rebuilding the system. You can't just put a little Band-Aid on something and expect it to be fixed. You have to really do the work.
We want to normalize that, right? Like what you're saying, they want to go back to a way, but it should already be normalized. Like ancestral education should already be a part of what, you know, education is. Education is diverse. It's all these different things. And so it should be already normalized, not like, oh, this is an Indigenous education, or this is the, you know, Native American type of perspective. No, this is education. It should be normalized. And I agree, actually, with your student org. I do know one of your members. I reached out recently to your student org on another topic. But just like, you know, with your student org, there was recently, I was a part of great leaders who are founders of the new organization, Voices of O'odham Students at ASU. I sat on, you know, 3 different committees here at ASU: the Land Acknowledgement Committee, Indigenous Culture Week Committee, and Native American Heritage Month Committee. And, you know, in a lot of spaces, there is still that lack of education of whose land we're on. There's a lack of education of the O'odham, the people, you know, whose lands that ASU do reside on. And even, I mean, all of them, the Hiachiratan, the Dana O'odham, the Akodham O'odham, the Ankh O'odham, there's that lack of education. And so this organization came together with O'odham leadership, you know, to bring that knowledge to the community. So, and that's the beauty though of it, is that we can still come together and you know, I would like to say, I can't even think of the word, not acknowledge, but address certain topics and certain issues, you know, just like with your student organization, right? The journalism perspective, then you have Alliance of Indigenous Peoples, and then you have, you know, Voices of O'odham Students. And then when you see all of those student orgs come together, we're addressing so many different topics, and we're really, you know, decolonizing all these different spaces within, this higher education. And that is vital, and that is crucial, and that is part of, what I wanted to emphasize within my platform.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a great conversation. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next speaker. So thank you once again. And next up, we have Miss Indian Arizona 2020 to 2021, and that is Miss Amy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. And did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
First, Skigdash, Ania Napjigik, Amy Lynn Spotterwolf, Ania Pam Amjad, Judge Shaik Wawik Gerdik Jikshan, Danatum Joy, Aniwood Gogo Kwaik Iheta, and Yamashmakut University of Arizona, Aniwood Miss Indian Arizona 2020-2021, Sapenta Takamapia Joa Sapa. Good day. My name is Amy Lynn Spotterwolf, and I come from the Fresno Canyon community in the Babakibi district on the Danatum Nation. I am 23 years old, and I'm a senior at the University of Arizona studying elementary education under the Indigenous Teacher Education Project. And I am Miss Indian Arizona 2020-2021. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'm really excited for our conversation. And yeah.
So excited too. It's interesting that you're U of A and I'm ASU.
I know you guys are ASU.
So to start out, do you want to talk about your crown a little bit?
Yeah. So this crown design was created back in 2000. The MIA Association hosted a contest and a logo contest, and a woman by the name of Valerie Welsh Tabot, she created this design, and she beaded it as well. She donated it to the MIAA Association, and the first woman to wear this design was in 2000. The design around the crown is obviously around the Arizona flag, but at the top, sorry, it's really tall. It's taller than Lulu, and so the rays turn into feathers, and the feathers are to represent all of the tribal nations that are here in Arizona, and also, and then the flag that stands in the middle is to represent the title holder. So it represents myself and where I come from, which is the Danatum Nation. And just like Isabella had talked about, like the sisterhood behind the crown, I have come, for me, this is my first title that I've ever held, as Miss. Before last year I was actually first attendant to Adriana, and back in 2018 I was first attendant to Miss Danatum Nation. So I haven't held a title, and this is the first crown that I've ever got to wear, which is really cool. And back in October 10th, I got it became official. I was when I got crowned, and so the following Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and a lot of my sisters from previous years were posting pictures of previous royalty events, and I've seen the girls that I've seen previous Miss Indian Arizonas, and I see them with their crown on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have that same crown, like I get to wear that, and I get to wear that, and like women like Shandine Parrish, Miss Navajo Nation, or Mariah Sharp, like they all got to wear this crown, and it's like it's so like it's almost like striking to me, because I never, not to say that I never thought that I would be here, but just the fact that all these inspiring and beautiful and strong, smart women who came before me got to wear this, and I have the honor to wear this as well. So I'm really happy. I'm really honored to be here and to hold this title.
With both you and Isabella, I love the sisterhood, angle of this. It's really beautiful, and kind of like me and Lulu were talking about, is as women of color, you really have to fight to get this position, and so it's just so beautiful to see. It's decades of women who have been strong, smart, and beautiful, just like you said, and it just continues the cycle. It just keeps going, and it's really great to see. So I wanted to ask you about your platform as well.
Thank you. So my platform this year is to virtually strengthen our connections. And this is my platform because of course, most of our events will be in a online modality like this one. And I just want to be able to strengthen our connections as the Indigenous people as Arizona. I want to like set up events. I want to participate in things like this where I can learn from other tribes, where I can teach about my tribe, and just strengthen our connections, because throughout history, our tribes have been connected. We have stories about how we had met, or for the O'odham, like how they were Hopi that lived here in Tucson, and how we would run up the river and go see our sister tribes like the Salt River and Gila River, and we all have connections. We've all been here since time immemorial, and that's really what I want to emphasize this year, is just emphasize those connections virtually. Also, as the first attendant last year, my platform was to promote higher education to Indigenous people, so that we can fill spaces that aren't typically filled by Indigenous people, but encourage them to come and fill those roles, because what better people to represent Indigenous people than Indigenous people themselves? So I'm trying to put them together. Those are really big goals for me, just throughout my life, and something that I want to promote as Miss Indian Arizona.
Like you said, the virtual aspect of things is really important, especially now. And it's really interesting to see how we've kind of fallen, like we depend on technology now. Pre-pandemic, obviously, it was a big part of our lives, but you could go to work or you could go to school and not have to use your laptop or your phone or whatever. You could do that. But now a lot of people are, they're struggling because they don't have access to internet, Wi-Fi, or even, just a phone in general or a laptop in general. So promoting that higher education and this digital virtual aspect of it, that's really difficult in certain areas, especially like rural reservations. And that's just something that this entire pandemic is just, I've been thinking about. How do we help, those people on the reservation really get where they need to be? Do you have any experiences in this kind of, I guess, situation?
Yeah. Right now, I'm going to school to be a teacher. So my goal as a teacher is to be a teacher for Indigenous students. And I really, what I want to do in my classroom is inspire my students to love school, to like to learn, to want to, I want them to be able to see themselves in roles like a teacher, like a doctor, like a lawyer, and inspire them. And I think that, and even teachers, we need Indigenous teachers. And so I think that a lot of the work to inspire people, it's in school. And our schools and our teachers should be able to inspire our youth to continue with life, continue in a career, continue into education if that's what they want, and just continue inspiring them. Sorry.
I love that you said about having students and young people being able to see themselves. A lot of times, and kind of what Lulu was saying, is everything in kind of the education system is so whitewashed. And that, I've almost only ever had white teachers. I think I might have had 2 teachers of color and 2 professors of color being in university. And that really does have an impact on how things are taught, specifically history. A lot of times it's the Native Americans and the Pilgrims were best friends, and that's not really the truth. So having Indigenous teachers teach this new generation what's going on, and the mistakes that were made, and steps that are being taken to fix it, steps that aren't being taken to fix it, that will really help, grow Indigenous culture, Indigenous communities. that's really great that you can go ahead and go into those classrooms and do that. And not only you're doing that, but you are fostering a community that will eventually be able to do that as well. So that's really great. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what inspired you to vote?
I actually have finished my early ballot last night. It's turned into night today. Voting is always so exciting to me. I think that just like what Isabella had said, our ancestors weren't able to vote. So I will vote for them, but also thinking about myself being an ancestor, I want to be able to make decisions and help my kids, my grandkids, my students. Like this is their life that we're voting for as well, not just for right now, but for the future. So definitely the youth, the future, just the idea of me taking the responsibility as an ancestor for them. That's why I vote, and that's my inspiration.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your comment. It was really great talking to you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring back Debbie so she can talk to us about voting a little bit more. Here we go. Hi, Debbie.
Hi. Gosh, it's so inspiring to listen to all these young women. Oh my goodness.
I want more time with them.
Yes. I think one of the most exciting things is, can you bring them all back on real quick? I want to make sure I share things with them. So I want to tell you, young ladies, how exciting it is to watch each of you. I can tell you that I grew up in one of the most remote areas of Arizona on the Navajo Nation. And, I think sometimes people think it's really cool to live off the grid, have no running water, electricity, phone, TV, satellite, whatever. Well, I didn't find it as fun. I didn't have any of those things growing up. And I grew up in a time where addictions were at an all-time high. And so to see the amazing strength and courage that you have, and I know that every one of you are going to grow from these experiences as you carry your crown. And I'm really excited to support you in whatever it is that you decide to do. And to hear that somebody filled out their ballot last night, that is exciting. And I think every one of you have so many opportunities ahead of you. And so some of you have seen some of the work that I've gotten involved with in the political arena. And what is rooted in the work that I'm doing in the political arena is to make sure that I'm fighting for rights that our Indigenous people have gone without for a long time. It's not that they have gone without, it's just sometimes making those connections between our traditional communities and ideas are not always strongly tied to what happens in our political arenas in the bigger world, either on the state or the national level. And so this is one of those times where we do have conversations with young people. And so there's times people will ask me, well, what do you want to focus on, Debbie? And immediately my go-to is young people who are between 18 and 24. They're going to live in this world the longest. They should be at the forefront of a lot of our decisions. Young women who need these opportunities are right here, and this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to build infrastructure and build our capacity to make sure that our young people, your nieces, your nephews, are having those opportunities. This is why I do that fight, is because your nieces and your nephews and you. But I think when it comes down to it, people always wonder, oh, those are politics. Nobody wants to get involved. But we are political pawns. In the United States government, we are seriously the political pawns that everybody wants to use us in every way. And, let's use some of that power to do things for ourselves. When it comes right down to it, we have so many powers. And often when I introduce myself to people, I will let them know that I'm a citizen first. Sometimes I'll shy away from, being in the forefront of activities, but I realize that doesn't benefit me in any way. There's a time to be humble. There's a time to be reverent. There's a time to be really, just keep it on the DL. But there's also a time where you have to flex your muscle. especially when you have the chance to speak up for your people. And so I've had to learn that delicate balance, and it hasn't been easy. It definitely hasn't been easy being Navajo, for sure. I know that in so many ways I'm stigmatized because I'm Navajo, or I push myself. I'm so driven, but I'm that way because of where I came from, because I went without water, because I went without electricity, because I went without satellite, because I had to herd those sheep. I had to take care of 15 little animals who didn't always want to go in one direction. And when you have that issue or that circumstance, you learn from it and you figure out a way. So I know each of you have platforms that you have that you want to pursue. And this, we're here to help you. We're here to help make some of those things possible. We can't do everything, but we can definitely do some things. So as we go into voting, some of the most important questions is the voter deadline is coming up. And I believe today we have 9 more days. Is that right, Kiara?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 9 more days, but I want to share something with you. I'm going to share my screen. I hope I can do this successfully. Let me try it and see what happens. Yesterday I was on a conference and it didn't happen successfully. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is a bit of news I want to share with you. I always believe that a small group of citizens, no matter who they are, no matter what race or what gender they are, that they have the capacity to do so much more. And Morningstar Leaders started this effort, Voices of Indigenous Voters, and we knew that we had to collaborate. We had to work with the American, we had to work with men, we had to work with the LGBTQ community, we had to work with our elders, we had to work with professionals and young people, and that's something that was really important. And then during this time, what we learned about our communities is the fact that there's different degrees of consciousness. And we partnered with Institutio, a local organization who made some funding available. And we learned that on a continuum from left to right, that there's a time when people are in a magical phase. They believe they can't do a whole lot about things. And therefore they kind of are just kind of hanging out, maybe playing games, maybe just kicking back. I'm not sure. But then they start, with a little bit of information, they move to an area where they figure out that they can control some things, maybe not all of it, but some things they can. And then as they get more and more information, they move over into a critical thinking phase, where they can get a lot more information. They recognize that their voices and their conversations they have with another person or with an elder or with a young person can really make a difference. And then there's people who know, in fact, that they do have a lot of potential if they can increase their conversations and their connections within their communities or in their neighborhood. They can do a lot more. So there's definitely a lot more opportunities available. And then in Morningstar, we also learned that in general, there's like 4 different types of people who turn out to vote. And this is what we call a resiliency framework. And it was captured by talking to about 60 different Native American voters in the area. We have all of their names, and these individuals are all active, and they all shared amazing feedback. But basically, among tribal voters, we learned that they voted for 4 different reasons. One is if they knew somebody in the military, maybe a Navajo code talker or a Hopi code talker or somebody who was Choctaw. They knew that they served, or they earned the Purple Heart Award, or they earned some sort of medal, and they were really proud of those individuals, and so they earned those privilege, that privilege in the service or in the military. So that was a reason why they turned out to vote. And then second, there were individuals who voted because they knew their ancestors couldn't. They voted because they had clans and villages that would support elders, and so that's why they voted, because it was a responsibility within their villages. And then the other was the contemporary idea that if you didn't turn out to vote, if you were 18 and over and you didn't turn out to vote, in fact, you were still voting because you gave more power to the people around you, um, and and therefore you did vote, because you influenced another person to do something or to do more. Another one is if you didn't vote, you couldn't complain anymore, so you lost that right the minute the election was over. And then those that were really visionary were people who could create change by sharing their voices and interweaving those indigenous values and beliefs. And a lot of them were like about the responsibility to one another. And when we talked with those 60 people, what we learned is they were registered, they were informed, and they did vote. A lot of these tribal members did vote. They took part. They enjoyed mailing their ballots, maybe because they lived in the area where they had a post office or even a mailbox in front of their house or a local area where they went, but that they were both actively involved in tribal and non-tribal elections. But one of the things they felt kind of concerned about is the fact that they didn't know any of their state leaders. They didn't know the 2 House of Representatives or the senator in their district. They didn't know their U.S. senator. They didn't know their congressional leaders. And they didn't know who the Board of Supervisors were. They didn't know what any of the county officials were and what their responsibilities were. They clearly said, I don't know what they do. What do they do, and what's their response? What does that have to do with me? But there was still a lack of information in general with individuals, and so that's what made it really very interesting, and why people hold back from voting. And basically, that's just rooted in not having enough education. But we also knew that people voted on issues versus political parties, which totally makes sense to me. And then just so you know that some of the most important dates that are coming up is the last day to vote in person early is the 30th. Yesterday was the last day to, I think it says here, mail your ballot in early, but sometimes we want to make sure, because of all the mail, we want to make sure we get things in early. And so those are some of the things that I've learned in this process. And I think that as we begin to learn more about voting and what's going on or what's important, it's really, really important to share just this little bit of information with you so that you really know how important this is. And Morningstar cares about things like this. So Kiara, do you have some pressing questions for me? I can't hear you, sorry.
The mute button, it'll be the death of me. I wanted to ask you about your own resiliency framework. What category do you think you fall in, or do you think you have a mix of multiple? And just a recap for everyone who's watching, there's the heritage, folklore, contemporary, or visionary categories.
There's actually several reasons why I vote. I'm a grandchild of a Navajo code talker. And then I have a lot of uncles and one auntie who served in the military. So my immediate family members are my father, my mother's side, and combined there are 41 members in my family who served in every branch except the Coast Guard. And then if I take my cousins' family members, our extended family members, which we're all family, there's close to 90 people who served in my family. I'm probably, on my dad's side of the family, which is from Noshchity, New Mexico, I'm probably the only grandchild who's never served in the military. And so because I've never served in the military, and because my uncles hold me accountable, they're like, what's going on? Why didn't you sign up? Why didn't you, and I'm like, I'll serve in other ways. So I serve in our communities, and I have so much energy, and I do a lot. So in a sense, that's my public service to our communities. So I vote for, because I'm a grandchild of a military person. I also know that our elders who were in the Long Walk or any of the tribes who have participated in some of those things, many of them couldn't vote. I know that there were many people who had things they wanted to do or efforts they wanted to lead, but because of the circumstances they were in, they didn't. I also know that, but if I didn't vote, my power would be given to somebody else, and I really don't want that to happen. And then finally, I think that I'm learning so much from our collaborators around the area. If it's people like Lucha, if it's, some progressive organization, if it's the Secretary of State, if it's our legislators, I'm learning so much from them. So my ability to tap into some of those resources and weave in my traditional ideas and principles, it makes me pretty powerful, and I can do a lot more. And then on a consciousness, I can remember probably in high school, I was like in this magical phase where I didn't know anything about voting. I had no clue. And then over time with education and pursuing more, ideas, I moved over very quickly to this really strong individual where I had lots of information. I could never share it enough. So that's kind of how I see myself. And I believe that we can move to these places where we're power engines for our tribes and our communities.
And I also wanted to ask about your household. You have multiple voters under one roof. And I wanted to, four. I was between 3 and 4. I was trying to count in my head.
We're working on 6 voters in our house. So we definitely have 4 voters right now.
Do you guys get a lot of knocks at your door?
We amazingly here in Salt River, I've never had our legislator knock on my door. I've never had one person knock on my door. I never had them leave literature on my door. And that's something, I think that's what inspired me to run for office, and is the fact that I didn't know who my legislators were. So this feedback we were getting from this focus group was accurate. They didn't know who legislators were. And so I Googled, I followed, I asked a lot of questions. And I think that I knocked here in Salt River and people didn't know what to do. They were like, oh, and that's how actually I met Isabella. And at that time, back in 2017, I was trying to recruit her. I'm like, do you want to go knock on doors? And she's looking at me like, are you crazy? And so Isabella happened to be one of those individuals that met me along that journey and learning how to knock doors. It's a very interesting experience. Teaches you so much about yourself.
That's really interesting. And I mean, that you were at our NAJA event and we kind of briefly touched on this. That's really interesting that there's 6 voters under one household and yet no knocks. I think like you're saying, like that's really an issue of, legislators and just anyone running for office. Why wouldn't you go to these communities and, try to reach out to them? That's really interesting. But with the voter,
I think there's this idea that if you have that many voters in your house, you're very valuable to a lot of political arenas. You're extremely valuable, and they do want to talk with you. But it's very interesting that it doesn't happen within a tribal setting. And I think the other thing is, if you are a consistent voter, people take you for granted. They don't believe they have to have conversations with you. But I find that a contradiction because I will vote on issues. I will vote on particular propositions, especially right now. We have a proposition that directly affects education. It directly affects our health. It directly affects reducing criminalization among people of color. That's really important, but I find it very interesting. So it's something that I fight to learn more about. So yeah, thank you.
And just a real quick last question. With all the voters in your household, how do your younger voters inspire you? Have they ever challenged you or made you think outside the box about anything?
Yeah, they want to. I think out of ASU, I had a group of young people that did question me, where's my money coming from? Who am I supporting? How much money did I get from them? And money is rooted in a lot of this. But, when someone first asked me why I decided to run, they're like, well, I wasn't wearing anything that determined what political party I represented. So I said, well, I'm running, I'm with the human race. And they're like, what are you talking about? But, as Indigenous people and young people, you've always heard grandmas say that, it's about giving, it's about helping. You never turn people away. And no matter who they are, even if they're Navajo, you don't turn them away. You help each other. those are principles and philosophy that I grew up with. And one of the things that as Navajos we talk about is Allah Ashlai, is you're the fire-fingered creature. You're part of that creature in all of these, in all of the race. And there's no color that separates you. It's the fact that you're Allah Ashlai. And so that's how I went out. And it took some time for people to kind of embrace that idea, but I wasn't here to support any particular race. I was here focused on families and children and people who were having a very difficult time. And the more and more people heard that, they were really eager and excited to support what I was doing. So I felt really good. And I'm glad that I educated other people about who we are in such a positive way. It had nothing to do with money or dark money or, whatever. It had to do with my philosophy and what, carried me this far. Very much the same philosophy that you shared when you were describing, your crowns and how they were made and the symbolism behind each of them. They're so powerful and impactful to learn about.
All right, we hit that hour mark. It was a really great conversation. For everyone watching, there will be more series coming. I think another one next week or in a couple weeks. Just make sure you stay tuned with Morningstar Leaders on social media and check out the website for more information about when the next series will be. I had a great time talking to you guys. I wish we had more time. It would be so fun to kind of delve more into those conversations, but I had a great time.
And we want to give a shout out to the Miss Indian Arizona organization, to the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, and to ASU. I'm an alumni of theirs, so I'm super happy that you all made it. And what's even more exciting about this panel is they were all at them, right? And this is, you got to show your excitement in it. You're all at them, right?
Yeah. How?
Yes, I'm excited. I'm glad. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. It was really exciting, and I'm just honored to be here, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the series.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a great day.